Can we unlock the deepest secrets of nature without altering the world forever? Today, a friend of mine will explain it to you.
July 16th, 1945. Picture the New Mexico desert wrapped in this eerie, absolute silence. And then, out of nowhere, a blinding flash of light completely tears across the horizon. We're talking about a light brighter than 1,000 suns. In that exact fraction of a second, a profound psychological fracture happens in the mind of the man who actually brought that light into existence. As the very first atomic mushroom cloud rises, ancient words from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita, start echoing in his head. Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. And you have to understand, this wasn't just poetry to him. For J. Robert Oppenheimer, this was a curse. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're not just going to run through the mechanics of bomb physics or rehash World War II battle tactics. Instead, we're diving straight into a dark historical thriller. Think of this as an existential psychoanalysis of guilt and immense power. We're going to look at J. Robert Oppenheimer, not merely as this brilliant physicist you've read about, but as a modern Prometheus, a man who literally stole fire from the gods, only to be instantly and permanently crushed under the terrifying weight of his own creation. Let's trace his descent. The physical toll this took on Oppenheimer was just undeniable. He turned into this haggard creator perpetually engulfed in a cloud of cigarette smoke. But what's truly fascinating here is how he actually processed the Trinity test. He did it through his deep study of Sanskrit and the Bhagavad Gita. He didn't see himself as the god Vishnu, the actual destroyer. No, he viewed himself as Arjuna. Arjuna was the human prince whose inescapable, tragic duty was to wage a horrific war against his own kin. He felt compelled by something cosmic and terrifying, realizing he was, in the end, merely the instrument of destruction. So you have this massive clash of perspectives. On one side, there's Oppenheimer's mythic dread, trying to reconcile his soul with the cosmic terror of Krishna's multi-armed form, the light of 1,000 simultaneous suns. But on the other side, you have the highly profane, incredibly grounded reality of his colleague, Kenneth Bainbridge. Right after the blast, Bainbridge just bluntly stated, "Now we're all sons of bitches." It's such a chilling realization from his peers. In that moment, they knew science had just crossed an irreversible moral threshold, and there was absolutely no going back. Part 1. The Chaining of Prometheus. The Weight of Guilt. So the war ends. Politicians and the public are openly celebrating the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki as this triumphant conclusion to a brutal conflict. But Oppenheimer? He was quietly collapsing inward. He was privately choking on the overwhelming guilt of knowing that the weapon he built had unleashed unprecedented horrors, melting flesh and erasing entire cities in a matter of seconds. And this mounting internal guilt fueled a really fierce resistance in him. When the time came for the US to develop the hydrogen bomb, which is a weapon exponentially more powerful, Oppenheimer and the General Advisory Committee pushed back hard. They rejected the crash program based on 3 pillars: technical concerns, moral boundaries, and, most crucially, geopolitical implications. Oppenheimer was terrified, absolutely terrified, of triggering a high-risk, world-ending Cold War arms race. He literally saw the timeline of humanity running out. But as you can imagine, a machine like the one he helped build just could not be stopped. The Atomic Energy Commission transcripts from that era reveal an incredibly stark reality. A key quote reads, "We are going to have a get tough policy, we have to have something to back it up." I mean, that perfectly captures the suffocating military establishment and bureaucracy of the time. They didn't want philosophical hesitation, they didn't care about his moral crisis. They demanded endless escalation, and they fully expected their brilliant creator to fall in line and provide the ultimate leverage. Part 2. The Poisoned Gift. Alienation from the World. When he refused to blindly escalate, the narrative violently shifted. His former allies completely turned on him. Now, to the rest of the world, he was still a public hero, right? The undeniable father of the atomic bomb, the ultimate icon of American scientific supremacy. But behind closed doors, it was a completely different story. He was living a waking nightmare. A profound, suffocating alienation just began to consume him. He became completely isolated in his own mind, haunted by these sleep-shattering visions of destruction. He chain-smoked so endlessly that his throat literally bled. He was bearing the physical manifestations of a mind that was quite literally tearing itself apart. And you know, this psychological torture, it wasn't confined just to him. His wife, Kitty Oppenheimer, experienced a tragic, parallel descent of her own. The agonizing pressure of the Manhattan Project, combined with the deep, deep isolation of Los Alamos and her husband's betrayals, it just hollowed out their home life. She battled debilitating pancreatitis, relied heavily on pain medication, and suffered through severe struggles with alcoholism. To those around her, she was an incredibly polarizing figure. People actually described her simultaneously as bewitching and completely impossible.
Part 3. The Trial of the Creator. The Red Scare Witch Hunts.
This private unraveling we've been talking about ultimately set the stage for a very public execution of his dignity. We're moving now to the claustrophobic 1954 security clearance hearings. This is the absolute height of the Red Scare and intense government paranoia. The very establishment that once crowned him a hero now wanted to strip him of his influence, his clearance, and his entire reputation. The timeline to his downfall was a steady, calculated escalation. It starts back in 1943, when a highly controversial conversation known as the Chevalier Incident takes place. Fast forward to 1949, Oppenheimer makes his fateful stand against the H-bomb crash program. By 1953, the political climate has drastically shifted, and President Eisenhower suspends his security clearance. Finally, in the spring of 1954, the Gray Board officially votes 2-1 to deny the reinstatement of his clearance.
To really understand why he lost that clearance, we have to look at his fatal flaw. Back in 1943, Oppenheimer told security officials a totally fabricated lie to protect his friend Håkon Chevalier from suspicion. Oppenheimer himself later admitted it was a, quote, cock and bull story. He thought he was just shielding a friend, but years later, his opponents, specifically William Borden, weaponized this exact lack of candor to formally accuse him of being a Soviet agent.
The secret personnel transcripts from April 1954 reveal a dark, chilling reality about how governments operate. Here was this brilliant man subjected to a grueling, relentless interrogation. The state made it abundantly clear. They only valued their Prometheus as long as he remained a compliant weapon. The second he developed a conscience that conflicted with national policy, he was completely expendable. And let's be absolutely clear, the hearing itself was undeniably flawed. The historical record confirms it was a complete judicial travesty born out of Red Scare paranoia. There were illegal FBI wiretaps placed on Oppenheimer and his legal counsel. And get this, those intercepts were secretly shared with the prosecutors arguing against him. Over 3,000 pages of evidence were purposely hidden from his own defense team. The prosecutorial misconduct was so severe, so blatant, that it actually led AEC attorney Harold Green to resign entirely, citing reasons of personal conscience. In this incredible, almost unbelievable twist of history, it took nearly 70 decades for the government to admit any of this. It wasn't until December 2022 that the Department of Energy issued a letter officially vacating and nullifying that flawed 1954 decision, finally acknowledging the egregious abuse of the judicial system. But of course, this vindication came way, way too late. By 1954, Oppenheimer's reputation had been irreparably fractured. Part 4. Living as a Ghost. The Final Years. Stripped of his clearance and his voice, the man who quite literally shaped the destiny of the modern world completely withdrew from the scientific and political spheres. He stepped into this hollowed-out exile, living the rest of his days as a ghost. His retreat took him far away from the power halls of Washington. In 1952, seeking a warmer climate for his daughter Tawny after she unfortunately contracted polio, the family visited the island of St. John. By 1955, they purchased a modest 2-acre plot of land on a secluded beach in Hawks Nest Bay. And there, the former hero became a forgotten castaway, just trying to outrun a legacy he could never actually escape, until he died of throat cancer in 1967. During his final years working at Princeton, observers noted he was just a broken intellectual, wandering the campus like a specter. In 1963, the government did attempt to make some amends by awarding him the highly prestigious Fermi Prize. But, tellingly, he accepted it not as a victorious redemption, but as an empty, symbolic apology from a world that had eagerly used him and then brutally discarded him. Which brings us to a final, really piercing thought. J. Robert Oppenheimer lived just long enough to see the inescapable truth of his creation. Humanity had permanently entered an age where it possesses the tools for its own total, fiery annihilation. He spent his final days crushed under the realization of the deadly chain reaction he had set in motion. And so we are left to grapple with the exact same existential dread that haunted him until his very last breath. Now that the destroyer of worlds has been unleashed, is there any way back?
Can we unlock the deepest secrets of nature without altering the world forever? Today, a friend of mine will explain it to you.